Good morning. I'm Rana Wehbe Watson, Senior Editor at Forbes Asia, joining you today from Hong Kong. I want to thank everyone for joining Forbes and the Trade Desk today to kick off the Groundswell Digital Media Festival. Now, Asia is home to some of the world's most exciting emerging markets and to a groundswell of technological innovation. So I speak for so many when I say that we believe Asia is going to define the future of the world and the internet. So it's a fitting privilege that we launch Groundswell today from Asia, talking about how marketers and businesses here are driving growth in today's new normal. Now, I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists. We are extremely honored to be joined by David Porter. David is Vice President of Global Media for Asia and Africa at Unilever. And I'm also thrilled to welcome Jeff Green. Jeff, of course, is the founder and CEO at the Trade Desk. Thank you both for joining us today. Now, during today's session, we'll discuss how marketing priorities can and should change and how technology can help marketers refocus on what's really important. I'd like to begin our session with a question to both of you. So first of all, let's start with David. David, marketers, like everybody else, had to rethink everything in 2020. So how have your priorities changed, and what has changed? What has stayed the same?
David, you're on mute, I think.
Oh, sorry. I think I've straight in there. I think our priorities were actually set long before the pandemic and the recession, and we've really stuck to them. So priorities, not so much changing. We stay really focused on the core beliefs at Unilever around purpose, brand safety, profitable growth. And we had 5 fundamentals for growth that we set up at the end of last year. They were shared with our shareholders and with other stakeholders, and we doggedly pursued them. The tone of it has changed a little, of course. And I think the big things have been the speed of the business cycle has just accelerated incredibly because things are changing so quickly. And of course, some of the key categories, I'm sure we'll come onto this later, some of the categories that our brands operate in, some have dialed up and some have dialed down as people's habits change. But at its base, it's exactly where we were in terms of strategy a year ago.
Jeff, what about you? What has changed in your strategy this year?
Well, it's interesting. I think similarly to David, where there's a lot of things that are just sort of more true on this side of COVID, where, for instance, as a company, I was addressing the team in late January saying, I was more concerned about the tidal wave of opportunity in connected TV and premium video being too big than not arriving at all. And little did I know that like upfronts would be a disaster. Everybody would be stuck at home streaming at unprecedented levels, and premium video go through 5 years of change in 1 year. I was convinced 2020 was going to be the biggest year of change without that, and yet there was even more. Similarly, our focus in Asia was largely about e-commerce and just looking at e-commerce saying, that's where we need to double down and affect change. That's where the most data-driven buying is happening. That's where attribution can best be done well. And of course, 4 out of 5 consumers in Asia are saying that they're using e-commerce more than ever and that they have zero plans to go back. It seems like all the change has brought just an acceleration to the strategies that we already had in place. If there was one major difference, I would just say that, in March, the global economy was put on pause, and all of our efforts to hire as aggressively as possible were immediately paused. A lot of the plans that we had with marketers specifically were put on pause. But all of that was for the most part retooled a month later, when it turns out the world wasn't ending as people were afraid of, and it appeared to be the beginning of a recovery. And then everybody had to figure out what to say differently, and then messages changed pretty dramatically for most brands, where there hasn't been a lot of a lot to laugh about in 2020. So like the tone of ads was more, we care, we're here for you, and then reminding people that they're here and how to get access to a brand or to a product.
That's great. So as David, again, as you mentioned, everybody's going through economic recession and, markets have changed. I'd also like to ask you, what role do you think advertising plays in driving business growth throughout this time? And how has your thinking of this evolved in 2020?
I think the role of advertising it's pretty much the same as it's always been, unless someone or something disrupts it. We're still there trying to build, great brand equity. We're still interested at what happens at the other end in terms of performance. So those things really don't change that much. I think we're more likely, to Jeff's point, to see disruption and change in these times. And for me, it's really about making sure that we are aware of that, we track those trends, and we take full advantage of them. And I always come back to what happened in India 2 or 3 years ago with Jio, with Reliance, when suddenly, the world's knowledge was put out in front of the Indian masses without a barrier of language or even literacy. So it's looking for those digital opportunities that come through. But at its fundamental, building brands that last and thrive is absolutely what we're about. So it's more of the same. I think how we talk to people has to change now because of the need to recognize the kind of situation we're in. So the guidance we've put out to brands is basically in terms of what sort of assets, what sort of creative material to use, that if you're nothing to do with the pandemic, don't pretend you are. You might want to pause, reshoot, but just think again about what you're about to say, because we've seen, I think, too much of this kind of bland "we're there for you" marketing. And there was a brilliant reel, I saw it on LinkedIn, I don't know how far it circulated, of multiple brands doing just that.
Yeah, so I think sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say there was one quote that got my attention that you mentioned about that. It's like, if a brand doesn't have a cause, it's not the right time to go hunting for one, basically.
Because people will see the joins, and the public, rightly so, are far more critical of inauthentic purpose activities than they ever have been before. And we've gone on to say, if you are part of the solution, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. So instead of telling people you're part of the solution, show them by your actions. And that goes way beyond marketing, way beyond what we say in advertising. And I'm delighted to hear other brands at the World Federation of Advertisers in the region, other brands talking the same way as Unilever now. So I think there's an acceptance of that.
That's great. Jeff, on your end, what role do you think advertising has at this time?
Well, so to me, advertising is the act of winning hearts and minds, and that has never been more important. And I think in a way, 2020 is the year where there's just more up for grabs. And it's in part because I suspect there are not very many people in the world whose priorities haven't shifted pretty dramatically in 2020. So given that there's arguably not a person on the planet who hasn't had to reassess what's important, whose life isn't disrupted, who doesn't have to rethink, why do I really care about that? Why do I do that? Did I really need that? How do I adjust my life to the new world that we live in? And in that process, brands can be displaced, brands can win hearts and minds, and the purpose of advertising to win hearts and minds plays a very critical role in that recovery. So what happens is, people pause indiscriminately in advertising, and that is in part because we pause the global economy. But as we get that economy going again, advertising is at the very front end, because it's, hey, we're here. Here's what we're doing. And then it's up to the citizens of the world to be judge and jury on, as David put it, who's authentic and who's not, who wins hearts and minds and who doesn't. But advertising is a critical part of the solution, where it drives growth and growth drives advertising, and that virtuous cycle needs to be running again in order for a global economy to do any good.
Can I just add something to that? Which is, I think, in packaged goods, especially, if you look at around the world, packaged goods advertisers turned off very quickly, but they turned back on again equally quickly. So in markets where we're seeing recoveries or slowdown in the pandemic, we're seeing a full steam ahead kind of recovery in ad spending from FMCG at least. And I know that's certainly the case for us and from our key competitors. It's very visible. So I don't really see the kind of advertising industrial complex as having slowed down that much. It just took a breather, regrouped, and now we're back, very much so.
Great.
And that's never been more true. What he just said, where whatever the pause was, the pace made up for it plus some.
Yeah.
Great. David, again, going back to brand and purpose.
Yes.
We've said in the past brands need to have purpose. And has coronavirus changed how Unilever thinks about its brands in Asia? And is it more or less important or pretty much the same now?
I think it's every bit as much as important. I mean, and it's not, it's a firmly held belief from the very top of our organization. When we had a change of leadership a couple of years ago, instead of dialing it down, we doubled down on it and really made it the center of all we do. And it's a big thing in terms of our employer brand, how we attract people to our agencies as well. So the phrase we use inside the building is that brands with purpose grow, companies with purpose last, and people with purpose thrive. And if you know why you're turning up at work, it makes a lot of difference. So it was very helpful to have that, because in times of the early days, the chaotic early days of this thing, people knew what they were supposed to do next without having to be told by anybody from another office. They were focused on getting the people safe. So it gave people very clear priorities. But I do think, back to the earlier point, this is a harsher climate now in terms of public reception to whatever your purpose message is. So if it's not authentic and it's not on point, and if you can't demonstrate that you're living it and making a difference, then it could do you more harm than good. So we have to be much more careful about that. I think the other place where that's helped us is in the digital marketplace, where, and I don't know how well this audience is aware of it, but certainly Unilever as an individual or company and through the World Federation of Advertisers, we're working really hard on the digital ecosystem, a lot of it quietly behind closed doors, but to make sure as best we can that it's safe from hate speech, it's safe for our children, and that as brands we're getting viewable and verifiable ad impressions. So we've really added that to our purpose now, I think.
Jeff, talking about digital, you've talked about how brands are more wary of user-generated content in 2020. They've become more worried about what's out there, especially as they can't control what content their ads show up against. So how do you see this issue evolving, especially for brands like Unilever that really put a lot of stock and take their purpose-driven brands very seriously?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this, because in the United States, I feel like we're having the wrong conversation on this topic. There's a lot of discussion. It's partly because we're in the middle of what is arguably the most politically charged election of at least my lifetime. But there's a lot of discussion about, is Facebook in charge of truth, and are they policing that adequately? I know there was a lot of discussion in Hong Kong last year over the same subject. But what I'm seeing from brands is a more meta conversation. It's a different conversation than what many others are having about Facebook. And it's more just about the value of user-generated content. And so, it's one thing when one person says to another, your politics are stupid, or you're on the wrong side of cause X, Y, or Z. It's another thing when you do that and then say, this conversation's brought to you by Unilever or Diageo or McDonald's. And brands, for the most part, are saying they have recognized in 2020 that UGC has been overvalued, it's been over-relied on, it's been a little bit easy. And particularly, if you go to any website and you scroll through the comment section, you're going to see the worst of humanity. You give somebody anonymity and a keyboard, and it's often not pretty. But brand advertisers are trying to adjust, and there's a great conversation happening around the world about what are alternatives and how should we value those, and just reconsidering what conversations brands want to be next to.
So what alternatives do you think these brands have?
Well, it's interesting because, there's probably not been a company that's more discussed or talked about than TikTok in 2020. And while it too is user-generated content, it doesn't come with politics and comment section that is quite the same as most other the social media. So I think they've definitely benefited from being a safer place, but there's also just premium content around the world on the video side that has been added to the mix. And then of course, with streaming at an all-time high everywhere in the world, including Asia, there's just more opportunities to advertise against that, creating more of an alternative. But when I'm asked the question, what's the alternative? I point to premium video every time.
Okay.
On that.
Sorry, what's that question?
Oh, I was just curious about your take on UGC and how the discussions change.
I mean, I wouldn't call out any particular platform on this, and I wouldn't call out one type of content from another. I think it's about making sure that the unsafe content is removed from whatever source it may come. And some UGC is amongst my favorite personal internet experiences, and some of it fills me with horror. So, but I would certainly agree we need to keep looking for ways to fix what we've got and to explore new opportunities as well. I would certainly agree that far, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm glad you point out, because this is bigger than a single platform. And I use anecdotally Facebook, but I in no way try to call out Facebook or anybody else for that matter. It is a bigger conversation than that, which is about UGC and specific UGC content, and people trying to parse through that is part of the dilemma and why it's an interesting discussion in advertising right now.
Great. I want to move a conversation a bit and talk about Asia, specifically China. David, earlier this year, Unilever revealed that online sales in China have grown 34% during the crisis. Has this held true for the rest of Asia? And can you tell us a bit more about what type of brands have been driving these sales?
Sure. So I think we all know, and it's common sense, e-commerce is up globally. The numbers vary market by market, category by category. And it's not always the easiest thing to track, but yes, it's definitely grown. And I do think there was some bumps in the road. There were a couple of markets where e-commerce platforms struggled with their logistics in the early days, partly because of the nature of the lockdown in those markets. So it didn't happen uniformly. I think there were a couple of other markets where we saw I was really fascinated to see, I think this is off the top of the head, Bangladesh and Japan didn't see the same kind of uplift as other markets, because although they're very different economies, they both have incredibly strong kind of corner store networks. So people had a ready alternative on their doorstep. So it's not the same everywhere. What's that phrase that's going around about we're in the same storm but we're all in different boats? So it is reacting. We're seeing different reactions everywhere. But overall, it's been phenomenal. And what it's done is just accelerated the digital transformation agenda that was already there. And brand-wise, obviously, it reflects people's purchase habits. So the public is buying a lot more of this kind of stuff. It's Lifebuoy. Antibacterial soaps and hand sanitizers and things like that. And the hygiene category overall has just gone into overdrive now, whether that's household cleaning or personal. So it will vary market by market, category by category, but we're seeing some cases bigger numbers than the Chinese number.
Have this had any implications on your advertising budgets?
Only that a proportion of it, we need to make sure that a proportion of it helps us definitely do that performance job on e-commerce, and to really be there with physical and mental availability at the time and place where people can buy online. That's not a radical change, because the vast bulk of our effort will go behind building brands and building equity. What that has also done, though, and I found this fascinating, is accelerated the level of interest that bricks and mortar retailers, our customers, have in partnering online as well. Because all the techniques we use for performance online can also be used to deliver traffic to bricks and mortar stores as well. So those new muscles have come up very quickly.
Yeah, like Jeff mentioned at the beginning, all this progress has just been kind of compact this year, especially when it comes to online drive. Jeff, again, Trade Desk made a major foray into China. Can you tell us more about your approach and how it has evolved over the last 18 months?
Yeah, sure. So as many know, I lived in Hong Kong and spent most of the year of 2018 in Hong Kong and China, trying to grow our business there. In fact, this year, sadly, we're not able to travel anywhere, but I made one international trip this year, and that was to China in January. So I'm sad that I can't be going back and forth like I was before, in part because I think China is one of, if not the most interesting opportunity on the planet today. It certainly is the most underdeveloped for the Trade Desk. So, we seemingly went from market 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and then came back to China, the second largest media market in the world. About 18 months ago, we sort of doubled down. We started hiring much more aggressively in our Shanghai office. We hired a GM in Calvin Chan, who's been really fantastic to accelerating our growth. We expanded our partnerships with Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Of course, that also now includes ByteDance as well with TikTok. So we just continue to expand. One of the things that has changed is, initially, because we had such great relationships with multinational brands, we were helping them dabble in China and increase their budgets in China. And we're doing a lot more for brands in China that instead of advertising on Facebook alone, they'll advertise on the open internet for the rest of the internet as well. So a strategy very similar to what Facebook has. So a lot has changed. The growth rates are fantastic in China right now. Our offices around the world, we have 25 offices. At the beginning of the year, we had 25 offices. Now we have 1,700, but with everybody working from home. However, the first office to reopen after COVID was Shanghai. So to me, that's an icon of what's to come, and my anticipation that Asia will continue to lead the way in that regard.
Yeah, I think China started before everybody else with this pandemic, and it seemed to be bouncing back also quicker than everybody. I also want to ask, where do you expect the major opportunities to emerge in China for you and your clients based on your observations?
Well, so, the argument that I'm always making to Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance is that I don't believe they're getting their fair share of spend given the user base that they have. And it's largely because most of the biggest brands in the world are not based in China. They're not headquartered in China. They're based in other parts of the world. They're advertising into China, and most of them are intimidated by it. They don't understand the market. They're afraid of it for a variety of reasons. And so having a partner and a technology that gives them assurance, as well as the degree of visibility that they have elsewhere in the world, is a sure way for them to close that gap. So that at the core is what we do there, and what we'll continue to do as we take brands from around the world to be global. And you just can't be global and not include China.
Yeah. David, I want to talk a bit about new skills and teams and this new normal. We've all had to learn, I've not hosted a webinar before the pandemic. I think we used to do live events. So we all had to kind of up our skills in a lot of sectors. So how are you thinking about skills for your team, and how are you bulletproofing your team for the future?
Great question. I mean, I think first of all, in terms of a digitization agenda and a data-driven marketing agenda, that was already in place, and we've been, I think, leading the way in that whole space for a number of years. While I was in China a few years ago, we set up what we called then a digital license to operate that all our marketers had to acquire through a lot of training, and that's now rolled out into something quite substantial and global. And the platform that we now use for that covers all functions in the business, not just media and marketing. So that that base level was there already. I think for me the big thing in this situation has been to find personal rhythm, and to live with the fact that that horrible new normal thing, that's not even a thing. This is just the situation we're in, and we need to find our own personal rhythms within it. So I've got over the fact that I don't fly anywhere anymore, and I visit a market every week, and I talk to all the stakeholders that I would talk to if I was there, and every single member of my team, we have a one-on-one, and that's meant that I've got to places I couldn't afford to go to, or maybe wouldn't give me a visa to get into even. So literally being able to travel the world and see every single market. So there are silver linings in this cloud if you look for them. And I think the other thing in this part of the world, of course, is we've got a ready-made bunch of experts in VUCA environments because they've lived it before. So making sure those skills are recognized in our global teams, I think, has been very important. Because when if you've been through SARS, or you've been through some of the terrible natural disasters we've had, or even social uprising. I mean, I worked through the Arab Spring, of course, in the Middle East. So it does give you a different kind of muscle memory about how to deal with things, and that skill's been a superpower, I think, for a lot of companies. And now, of course, all the moves into data-driven marketing, agile teams, sprint teams, all of these things, they were all in place, but we're just doing it a lot quicker and a lot more often than we were before. And for one, I'm very pleased about it. I think it brings a different kind of leadership. Certainly, I describe it as leading from the middle, not leading from the front, not telling people what to do, but empowering them. And I think that makes companies better places to work.
That's great. And Jeff, you have launched back in April the Edge platform on the Trade Desk, and it's interesting in your blog entry launching it. You said everyone has to do more with less, which is why they need to follow the data. So can you tell us more about the platform, what it offers, and also how are you seeing demand for these digital data-driven skills that you're offering on it?
You bet. So first, just a little bit of history. So about 7 or 8 years ago, we found that the gating issue to our business growing was really just education about programmatic. And we spent a lot of time just training people on what is programmatic and helping it grow and evolve. And so we decided that we were going to create, our aim was to create the very best programmatic training that had ever been created. In order for that to get adoption, we had to make it so that it was not a Trade Desk commercial. Like if it were, hey, let me tell you why our platform is the best, and people had to sit through that for 10 hours, it would just be a nightmare. Nobody would ever consume it. But by making it sort of more meta than that, making it about just data-driven marketing, which is sort of a euphemism for programmatic, we made it so that people wanted to consume it, and we just had a lot of success. But we had this philosophical position that we'd taken from the beginning, which was in order to make people really value it and appreciate even the production quality that we put into it, because we spent millions of dollars on it, we wanted to charge for it. Not because we wanted to make money on it or even recoup money from it, but we wanted people to value it. And we held to that position over the 8 years that we had it. Tens of thousands of people completed it. I think by every measure, it's been the most successful programmatic training out there. But when COVID hit and we saw especially the big agencies, start with layoffs. We just felt like this was a moment where we needed to rethink that philosophy and throw it in the garbage, frankly. So our commitment to quality training is higher than it's ever been. But we wanted to give it away for free because we felt like there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in our industry that would be transitioning to a new job. There would be lots of people joining it. And that because advertisers have to do more with less, in that recovery, you have to justify a lot more to the CFO than you did 6 months ago. And that means that things have to be data-driven. And so we tried to put all the answers in there. We have also been working on content that is specific for China. Now, that's the reason I was in China in January, was to create a Mandarin version of Edge that is customized specifically for the uniqueness of China. And at some point in the near future, we expect Japan to be the third version. But that Chinese version will launch in early 2021. But we're trying to create as much understanding in the ecosystem as possible and continue to add to the content. So I'll actually start filming again in the next few weeks, finally, after not being able to get that many people in the studio. So,
have you seen the tangible demand for it this year then, after you've offered it for free? And, like you said, a lot of people are looking to gain new skills given the situation.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I forget whether this is just forecast or whether this is what's happened, but I believe it's true that we've had more people complete it this year than all the other years put together. Now, of course, giving it away for free helps that. But I also just think this is a moment of change. I think there are a lot of people looking for new jobs. And it was great. I was talking to somebody at a very senior level at one of the biggest publishers in the US. And he said, wow, I watched it. First of all, I had no idea it wasn't there or that it was there until a year ago. And then when I did, I learned it was only available for Trade Desk customers. I'm a publisher. I didn't really use it. But after I watched the portions on data and the mechanics of programmatic, I was encouraging our C team to watch it, partly because they could never admit publicly the things that they don't know, but it's a way for them to sort of get up to speed. It's the fastest way for them to get up to speed. So hearing somebody in our space endorse it so loudly was just one of hundreds, maybe even thousands of notes and messages we've received. But the numbers don't lie. It's been incredibly successful.
That's great. David, I want to talk a little bit about the brands, Unilever's brands, and what have they been doing differently this year than in the past? For example, you showed us the Lifebuoy. Lifebuoy reminds me, the soap that we had in school growing up in a, less than a great situation back home. And the whole message of Lifebuoy, I remember the ads on TV were all about hygiene, which is very relevant today. So how has this message evolve, and how brand like Lifebuoy, for example, is doing its messaging at the moment?
Yeah, good question. I think for anyone from the States, that's Lifebuoy to you, same brand. It's one of our oldest brands. It was launched in the UK for a cholera outbreak and then used a few years later, still 100 years ago, to help with the Spanish flu. So it was born out of purpose because we know alongside masks and possibly youth, great hand washing is the key to beating these kind of pandemics. And we had to develop a load of new muscles. I mean, for instance, when borders shut, you can't actually shift stuff around the world. So in one market in Southeast Asia, we built a new hand sanitizer factory for Lifebuoy in, I think it was 18 days. And if I remember rightly, it was open and functioning within 21 days, start to finish, which is no mean feat and not our normal way of working. As an organization, we were procuring PPE, ventilators. We built medical facilities in some parts of Africa where we didn't feel our factory staff would have cover if they needed it. We were hiring hotels in Dubai for our dormitory-based workers to get them away from those labor camps, etc. So, and it's also transformed how we work with frontline partners. So people like Grab, Uber, the hawker centers, which those of you who know Singapore will know it's a predominant place where people go to eat in the open air. We've been working with them on care packs to make the places safe for the public and to make them safe for the workers as well. So there was some of that going on, but nothing like the extent to which it's been happening. And I was particularly proud of how we turned that into advertising. And there was an ad written actually by one of the senior marketers overnight. And it basically said, this isn't an advertisement for Lifebuoy, it's a public information film. Just buy the nearest soap you can get and wash your hands. And we named some of our competitive brands in that work. And as a result, we were able to have a different kind of relationship with a lot of our media partners because this was public information. And a few of them, and you know who you are, were really collaborative in terms of creating native work that we could put out onto their platforms. And that makes a big, big difference when you can get that. We're even making new stuff. I mean, we didn't make face masks. We do now, which is great. We've just brought the brand back into the UK after decades away. So there's been a major, major change in how we work. I'm proud to be associated with that brand, especially.
That's great. I think
a note on that it's just genius when you do the right thing and amazing marketing at the same time. Because it's great. It's a great way to market, to speak that way and that tone to consumers and do good at the same time. It's just an amazing thing to do good and at the same time do great marketing.
Thanks, Jeff. And it came from an understanding a few years ago with our previous leadership that we've only got one planet and we were behaving like we had five. And you can't win this thing alone. There's no world champion of sustainability or purpose, right? We all have to win together and collaborate because otherwise we all lose. And it's just evolved into this idea that we're gonna, I think originally the ambition was halve our impact on the environment, double our sales, do the impossible. And when you bind these two things together, when you put purpose on your P&L, you really have to land it. Yeah. So that's where it came from, the genesis.
That's great. Disaster definitely brings everyone together. Like you said, we only have one planet. Jeff, what about you? What have you been working to drive growth effectively at the Trade Desk? Is it acquisition, client acquisition time? Is it expansion time? Or how are you working internally about driving growth in this pandemic?
Well, so I think you can make an analogy to the culture of a company, and David was just speaking about the culture at Unilever, and I think this concept holds up in all the things he was just saying as well. But in our case, for about 11 years, in his case, for multiple decades, you've been making deposits in the bank that is culture, that is purpose, that is vision. And for the most part, companies in 2020 have been making withdrawals from those accounts, meaning it's really hard to create new purpose now. If you didn't have it before, good luck. If you didn't have unity before, good luck. If you didn't have a great culture before, too late. And instead, you're drawing on it. And so I think we're fortunate in that Trade Desk has one of the best cultures in our space. We've made it so that people are really just trying to get focused. Like there's a lot to juggle. Moments before this, I was working on schoolwork. Like I'm engaged with my kids' school at a level I never ever thought I would, and that just takes up a tremendous amount of time. And I think those sorts of examples affect almost everybody's life. Since all of this started. So anyway, that's perhaps a long way of saying I'm just trying to help keep our team focused, remind them of the vision that we've always had, remind them of the purpose that we always have, But staying focused at a time when there's this much change and this much opportunity, as well as the fact that advertising has to lead recovery, for the most part, acquisition and whatnot this year would be a massive distraction and a mistake. It's more about keeping people focused, trying the hard task of hiring well in this environment where you don't meet people in real life, and try to draw on the 30% of communication that is verbal and not the 70% that is nonverbal. Those are the things that I think we're sort of leaning on and relying on for our growth in what is the biggest land grab year in the history of our company.
Now, we're talking, I mean, a part of this discussion is we're saying the new normal, assuming that the old normal is gone, basically. It's not just a period and things are never going to be the same, arguably, right? So do you, given this, I'll start with David, will this year impact how you and your teams market in the future at Unilever? And if so, in what ways?
I think it's bound to, Rana. I can't see how it can't, because it's not just one thing, but maybe two or three. So we know we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the foothills of it if you look at the global numbers. So, I mean, it's moving geographically, but with there are some big hits yet to come, mostly, sadly, in the developing world, where we're at least able to cope as a race. But we've also got global recession. I think the only markets that aren't in recession now are the ones that just haven't called the numbers yet. And that changes a lot. And of course, I mean, we're living in slightly more protectionist, xenophobic, nationalistic times than we have for a while in a lot of markets. You triangulate those things and you end up with, a lot less travel, a lot more cocooning at home, which is but if you look back over the last 10 or 15 economic downturns, it's a very consistent pattern. And also, and I think this is one of the opportunities for lower ticket priced goods. There's a tendency, I think, for people to give themselves small rewards in compensation for the large deprivations that they're suffering. So, people's shopping habits change dramatically, and people will pamper themselves in affordable ways. I think e-commerce can only grow in that world. It's interesting. I'm seeing parallels in retail and TV, where the omni-channel retailers are fine because they can just pivot between the two, but the pure play bricks and mortar companies are struggling. And equally in broadcasting, we're seeing traditional TV companies who are able to get into OTT are going to fare really well. I mean, we look at what's happened in the Philippines recently. When we had the largest network losing its license. I mean, Philippines digitized overnight to the extent that took us 4 years in China and 15 years in the rest of the world overnight. So the speed of change that we could face in some markets is like nothing we've ever seen before. So yeah, there's going to be some change. The bit I'm really interested to see is what people talk about a content cliff, and have we reached it or not? And I just don't know what's on the other side of that. And will a hero emerge? Like the Korean dramas in Southeast Asia, or even Bollywood in the Middle East. Where are we going to get this stuff from? Because we're going to need some content pretty soon.
Yeah, streaming services, I think, are working hard on producing all kinds of content to keep people entertained these days. Jeff, to you as well, how do you think this period is permanently impacted how your team operates?
Well, so, I know that there are some who say that we'll never work from offices again, and that these things are we're work from home forever. I for one really hope that's not true. As one of I think the vast majority of people who feel sort of isolated at home and eager to get back and see people in the office and be in collaborative places. I think that will always be the more productive way to work, but of course that has to be safe. But as it relates to how marketing has changed, because we've crammed so much change into 1 year, like as David was describing the move to digital in the Philippines, they're not going to undo that. As we become more data driven in advertising, the same thing happened in the global financial crisis. Programmatic wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the global financial crisis, because it forced everybody to cut, rethink, and then become data-driven. I got to be more deliberate because I have to do more with less. The same thing is happening right now, and people have to do more with less, and that accelerates the move towards digital. And I think when you're doing really well and everybody's making money, that is when you get complacent and you don't innovate and you don't change. And whatever amount of discomfort and pain and tragedy has come from 2020, which certainly we've had more than our share as a planet, but it does instigate lots of good change for the long haul. We've talked about some amazing marketing in this discussion already. That's all positive change. So maybe it's my eternal optimism, but I just think that the good that will come of this will not go away and we'll be benefiting from for years to come.
That's the silver lining, I guess, in different situations. Do you agree, David? Do you see any of these positives that Jeff does in how we're going to be moving forward?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've worked in Asia for the sort of second half of my professional career, and the thing I love about this part of the world are the graphs never go flat. They're always ups and downs, and both directions create opportunity. So wherever there's change, there's huge opportunity, and I think it will. This has just sped up the digitization and the modernization agenda, and I think we're going to see, particularly in Jeff's area, a much more considered and scaled use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. That's been brooding for a long time, and I'm very conscious that this industry needs to do it to itself before somebody else does it to them. So I think we're on the verge of that for sure.
That's great. So we have some questions that have come in from the Q&A, which I'd like to pose. One question, either of you, whoever would like to take it. There's lots of talk about identity and privacy in the industry right now, and how we preserve relevance while protecting privacy. What is the APAC perspective on this issue? So identity and privacy, anyone would like to answer this?
David, David, I'd love to hear what you say first.
And I'll keep it simple and sort of at a high level, because it concerns us all. And I think, I'm always conflicted between what the industry wants and the hat that I wear as a viewer. And I remember watching a channel where I was called out by name, "Hey, David," at the start of a commercial. And that I found totally creepy. And I think there is a real fine line there. And, and that definitely crossed it for me. Other people may love it. I think because this really is combined with, there was another question on the line about Apple and the things that are going on there. And we've put our name to an open letter along with a lot of other people saying, look, we really support the issues around consumer privacy and choice, and we think that's a good thing. But we've also got an internet that's ad funded. And somehow we have to balance those two things. And if it's not the way we're doing it today, then I think the players need to sit together to work out a way that is operable. And just in terms of privacy and data protection, etc., I mean, we're really careful about this. Our in-house legal counsel, who works with the media team, also runs the data committee at the World Federation of Advertisers, and we always put in every market, we work to whatever the highest standard is anywhere else in the world. We don't wait for a marketplace to have strong regulations. So we're determined to stay on the right side, not just of the rules, but of what the public would expect. If someone feels like their data is being misused, then that's not good enough for us. So I do think it's all about the consumer experience, not just following the letter of the law. But I'd be fascinated, Jeff, to hear the TTD position on it.
Yeah, as I've been thinking about this question, my biggest concern is actually just staying brief, because there's so much to say on this topic. But many people don't know there is a chess match going on right now between Apple and Google and the open internet, those two companies in particular, Facebook changed the game a week and a half ago when they said we are no longer collecting IDFA. There's been this chess match, and it's sort of like when you watch the movie The Big Short and they open the show saying the entire world's economy collapsed over something you probably know nothing about. Let me try to explain it to you. I feel like right now the entire world of information is debating how it is going to pay for itself. And there is a chess match, a tug of war, if you will, going on over who's going to control that, how it's going to work, and will this be controlled by a few very large companies, or will there be a competitive, open internet? And as a result, especially when Google announced that they plan to get rid of third-party cookies and try to prohibit the open internet from having targeted advertising that they plan to sustain using logins, we felt like that was a moment where we needed to start engineering an alternative. This is why a few weeks ago we announced our unified ID solution. That incidentally is a global solution. It will impact Asia as much as it will any other part of the world. In fact, I would argue more so because most mid-sized companies that have historically been competitors to the Trade Desk, for instance, could never afford to enter in markets like Vietnam or the Philippines or Thailand. And as a result, those markets have been largely dominated by companies like Google. So if there was that level of asymmetry in those markets, it would be even more owned by Google, creating less opportunity, competition, open market in each of those places. So fortunately for us, there's been a lot of support from the IAB, a lot of support by the biggest companies in measurement, and even some of the companies that are labeled walled gardens have expressed desire in participating. So I'm extremely optimistic that the open internet will solve this in a way that they didn't in GDPR. We've learned a lot of lessons from all of that. But there is no question that the quid pro quo of the internet is bigger than any one company, and I don't believe that that can be disrupted by any one company.
So, interesting view. David, one more question I'll take from the audience. That's for you. How does Unilever think about working with the e-commerce marketplaces in Asia, where the market is much more fragmented and diverse? And how does that impact your marketing strategies?
Yeah, and this comes back to what we were saying before about one storm, different boats. When you start, it's something I think we realized very quickly as we were responding to the huge increase in e-commerce in particular, that you can't have a one size fits all. How we operate with Amazon in the States does not necessarily inform how we're going to operate with Shopee or Lazada in Southeast Asia. So the good thing is, I think our teams have become much more connected in that space as a result, so that you're constantly swapping ideas from all parts of the world. And it's great that we've got a really connected global media function, global e-commerce function, so we can talk to each other and shift ideas across platforms at speed. But there's no doubt we can produce all the playbooks in the world, but actually how you work in a market is the thing that really drives e-commerce strategy. I think we're beginning to see although there's quite a lot of single market players, we're beginning to see 2 or 3 players emerge across Asia where there are some consistencies. And of course, a lot of them have strong Chinese backing. So we've got good know-how from how we work with Ali, Tencent, etc., to bring to it. But at that end, it's very, very operational. I don't think it impacts really on things like global strategy. So the two live quite happily side by side, I think, at least in our business.
I'll reserve the last question for myself to ask you both on, I know there are a lot of people from the industry watching this webinar. So what would be your advice to marketers who are probably working now on allocating their budgets for next year, and to brands who are seeking to stay relevant and visible in this time? So Jeff, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so my advice is to be data-driven. First and foremost, to look at where the market is going and not where it's been. If you look in the rearview mirror, you're likely to miss something. There's never been a time that is more of a land grab time where consumers' minds are open to something new, and that you are either going to win or lose share in an environment like this one. And it's really important that people are advertising and marketing in an effective and data-driven way. I just can't express enough how much the global economy needs them to be marketing effectively, because we've got to sort of all get back to work, if you will.
David, what's your advice?
I think a lot of it comes from some of the things that Jeff's been talking about. But I think firstly, it's about being positive and going for growth with purpose, and really knowing where you want to be in 5 years' time. One thing that worries me slightly is the overemphasis on the performance side of our business, because there's opportunity there. And I think we need to drive performance without forgetting about brand health, because brands can decay deceptively slowly if they're not giving a lot of attention. So that it's important we get that balance right. And the third part, I think, is just to learn from mistakes. Marketers aren't always great at doing that. We like the case histories that win. And I think in this world now, it's the mistakes from which we learn more than anything else.
Well, thank you. If there's anything you'd like to add before we close the conversation?
I like the note David extended on. That was really good.
Thank you very much as well. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you both, Jeff and David, for this great and informative conversation. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to head over to the Groundswell site to check out more upcoming sessions. With 3 days of programming featuring innovators, disruptors, marketers, leaders, and even award-winning TV presenters and Olympic gold medalists, we hope we find something to inspire you. Thank you once again, and have a great day. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Stay safe. Wash your hands.